The main character asked the guy if he wanted to kill her. The boy was surprised and looked questioningly at the girl. The protagonist said she wished it was painless. But the guy asked her what she was talking about. He said that as a faithful servant of Lady Selena, he could not do such a thing. This loyal servant. The protagonist knows a future in which he will attack her with magic. The protagonist thought he was the worst kind of character. The main character told the guy to forget about magic. She said it would only be better for him. The guy was surprised and said it was a good joke, but the main character thought the guy was shameless. The main character woke up in this world just a few days ago. This book is The Crown of Dawn. The protagonist admitted to herself that this novel, which she read to her sister, who adores fairy tales, did not seem interesting to her at all. But she had to read it to her sister more than once. In that world, she lived only for her sister. The main character, an orphan, was adopted by a couple who had no children, but soon they had a child of their own. Unfortunately, the protagonist's sister had been in very poor health since birth, and her parents blamed the protagonist for all of her misfortunes. She was poorly fed, abused, and beaten. The protagonist has been taught that her whole life is devoted to her poor little sister, what she should study, what job she should get. All this was decided for her sister's sake. The protagonist realized it wasn't her. At times, she hated her sister because she had to do whatever she needed without question. But when she saw her lying in the hospital bed, she couldn't hate her. It brought even more misery to the girl. Their relationship was very unstable. They both hated and relied on each other. The protagonist realized that there was no simple explanation for such a complicated relationship. Soon, her sister left this world as well. They had no time to understand each other. The protagonist's sister was not even 20. At that point, the need for her stopped. It didn't take long to kick the protagonist out of the house, and so when she found herself on the side of the road, her will to live dried up completely. After a while, the protagonist was already standing on the edge of the roof. She said that until now she had existed at the mercy of others. Now she didn't even know how to be. The protagonist realized that she was very tired. She had no desire to remember anything. She didn't even have the strength to take care of herself. She didn't want to fight any more difficulties. The protagonist took off her shoes and thought she had had enough of everything. She didn't understand why only the weakened figure of her sister remained in her memory. The main character didn't realize if her sister was all she lived for. Shouldn't she have remembered her somewhat vividly? The protagonist didn't understand if she couldn't go on the mend for her even for a moment. But the main character said it's all good now. She said it was the end. After a while, the protagonist opened her eyes and was surprised to think that there was more to it. She felt as if she had been reborn in another different world. The main character's room was being cleaned by maids. Selena didn't realize if the room was too bright. At that moment, the maid noticed that Selena was awake. The maid got very excited and shouted. After a while, the protagonist was visited by her family. Her mom told her that she had fallen down the stairs and only woke up 4 days later. She asked if she remembered it. Dad told Selena they were very worried. The protagonist didn't realize who these people were. She realized she couldn't speak. After a while, the doctor examined her and told the family that she had been in bed for a few days, so it must be difficult for her to talk. The doctor said that the protagonist needed a rest, so he suggested she come back. Selena realized that if she had understood correctly, this young man was Selena's brother, Aaron Howitt. The protagonist realizes that these two are Selena's parents, the Duke and Duchess of Howite. Selena realized that after she committed suicide, she became Selena. But at this point, she began to worry about where the real Selena was. But she thought she didn't know and didn't want to think about it and decided she'd rather sleep for now. After a while, the maids brought supper to the girl's room. Elena was surprised at the amount of food. She thought it was a bit heavy for a sick person's diet, but her stomach was empty and she decided she would eat it. A few days have passed and the protagonist's voice has returned. However, it is still hoarse. At that moment, the protagonist's parents entered the room. The Duchess asked the girl how she was feeling. Selena said it's okay. The Duchess rejoiced and said that the girl even had her voice back. She said they were very worried. The Duke said it was really wonderful. At this point, the protagonist thought that maybe she was the one who was too sensitive, but it was quite unpleasant for her to call complete strangers Mum and Dad. At this point, she asked her parents where they were. She didn't realize who she was. The protagonist's butler recalled her saying that he'd better forget about magic. He didn't understand why she was saying that. The Duchess asked Selena if she really didn't remember anything. She said they were her parents and Aaron was her brother. The Duchess said their family. Mom asked Selena if she remembered Lucas or the holy maid Ariel or the maids. She asked if she didn't remember the party either. At this point, the protagonist realized that she had heard about this somewhere before. Or rather, I read it. In a stupid children's book called Crown of Dawn. In that book, the villain's name was Selena. The protagonist was remembering the name of her personal servant. But at that moment, he said it was tea time, and she lost her train of thought. But as far as Selena could remember, he's the orphan that the real Selena brought into her home. She made him her servant and used him as a fish for many things. The guy was devoted to her, and so, assessing the situation, just went with the flow. He ends up being the first to betray her and try to kill her. At this point, the main character told the guy to back off. She said she wanted to go to bed. Selena told the maids that she wanted them to leave too. One of the maids tried to object and said that the girl was still unwell, but Selena said she was fine and asked to be left alone. After everyone had left, the protagonist lay in bed and realized that it was very soft and no fluff. She said she wanted to lie here for the rest of her life. The main character said she couldn't believe what happened to Selena. The villainous Selena was a greedy woman. She was jealous and wanted everything she didn't have, including the duchy that Aaron was to inherit. She lacked the talent to fulfill her desires. She practiced day and night, but it did not bring results. Aaron, in contrast, was an outstanding student, but in other ways her brother was superior, and then her anger grew. It didn't take long for the villain to spring into action. Selena bewitches Aaron, making him fall in love with the heroine, the holy maiden Ariel. Even though Selena had managed to melt the ice between them, Ariel's allies found out what she had done and were disappointed in her. She was then imprisoned in a dungeon. Selena, however, was not able to get what she wanted. She was overcome by illness, and at the age of 23, she died alone and in confinement. The protagonist realized that the girl had a bad fate. She said it was nice to lie on such a soft bed. She said, "You're very relaxing." The protagonist didn't want to work for anything. She didn't want anything at all. She thought she'd die when she died, but until then she'd live. Until then, she had no desire to arise. She never had any desire to arise. She jumped of her own accord, no hesitation. But still, the protagonist didn't understand why God used another man's body to bind her soul to him. But she didn't understand if it didn't make sense. It was all very troublesome for Selena. She decided she would go back to sleep. And then Selena had a dream where she was standing by her sister's hospital bed. When her sister died, she didn't shed a tear. The protagonist's only thought was that her duties ended there. At that moment, the protagonist found herself in the dungeon where Selena was imprisoned. She thought that this might be the last moment of Selena's life. At this point, Selena started beating on the bars and begging to be saved. She tearfully begged me to help her. She asked for someone to stand up for her. She begged that at least at the moment of death someone would do it. Selena didn't realize how it was that she was dying all alone, so miserable. Selena didn't want to die. She realized she was terrible and didn't want to die. With her last strength, she begged for someone to save her. The protagonist realized it was just awful. She wondered if that was why Selena had called her. The main character realized that when Selena was on edge, she wanted someone to stand up for her. The protagonist didn't understand if Selena wanted her, who also died alone, to fulfill her wish. But the protagonist realized that she had deliberately chosen death. She didn't understand if Elena had called her because she wasn't ready to give up her life. Did she do it so that her death wouldn't be so miserable? The main character didn't realize then Selena did it to kill herself before she got sick and died alone. The protagonist realized that she was now living in Selena's body, and would die at 23, that's all. The protagonist woke up and realized that here we go again. She didn't realize how awful it was to listen to the requests of a dead person. Afterwards, she went outside and lay on the tablecloth. She realized she had too many problems. From that day on, she decided to try to live this life well, and to begin with, she tried to leave the chambers. But everywhere she went, there were maids bustling about. Selena realized that she just wanted to go for a walk, and that she shouldn't be so patronizing. Selena didn't understand, and why only so many favors were needed. At this point, the protagonist said she'd had enough. She said she didn't care that Selena was in misery. She said she's been gone a long time. At this point, the protagonist decided she was going to take a little nap. At that moment, Selena heard some sounds and thought someone was here. Selena thought it was a ducal residence, and she was a duchess, so she could sleep and not worry about anything. But the noise was starting to bother her too much, and she didn't understand why it was so noisy. She didn't realize who the hell was in there. At this point, the protagonist began to crawl towards the source of the sound. Then she saw a guy swinging a sword. Selena was surprised and thought it was unexpected. She didn't realize there was no room in the residence for a training ground. She decided to pretend she wasn't here. At this point, Selena started to crawl away, thinking she'd better find another place. But at that moment, she realized that her hair was tangled in the branches. At that moment, Selena wondered why her hair was so thin and delicate. She didn't realize if it was because it was in the novel. The protagonist realized that in a situation like this, if she didn't call for help. At this point, she turned to the guy. After a moment, the guy started to look around but couldn't find the main character anywhere. That's when Selena said she was here, but the guy started going somewhere. Selena was a little upset because she was the one calling. At this point, she wondered where the guy had gone. At that moment, he stood in front of the girl. Selena's personal butler was eating dessert at the same time. He said that no matter how many cakes he ate, it was still delicious. But the guy was surprised because he couldn't believe that the main character told him to eat cake and rest. He wondered what she was doing now. He hoped nothing would happen to her. At this point, the guy apologized to Selena for not hearing from him for so long. The protagonist agreed and asked if he could help her. She said her hair was so thin that she couldn't untangle it. But at that moment, the guy laughed. The protagonist didn't understand why he was laughing. She didn't realize if he was laughing too much. Selena got a little frustrated and thought to make the guy laugh if he wanted to. She realized that this was why subordination was so important. At that moment, she realized that she knew the guy for sure. After all, he is the elite writer of this family character from the novel. Selena tried to remember his name, but she couldn't. She turned to the guy but didn't say his name. The guy got angry, but he said his name was Lucas. Selena turned to the guy again and asked for help. She said her hair was tangled and she couldn't move. Lucas smiled and said he'd be happy to help her. In response, the protagonist thanked him. After that, the guy got down to business. Lucas thought Selena wasn't worthy of being a duchess. Selena looked up at the sky and said it was good weather today. She was standing on the edge of the roof. A few hours before, Lucas remembered that Selena had turned 19 this year. Everyone knew her as a notorious villain. Everyone in the Howitt family is a very good-natured person. Lucas didn't understand why she was the only one who was hunting so hard for the inheritance. Once it became known that her brother Aaron would inherit the duchy, she began to insist that she was the rightful heir. In addition, she continued to pursue the holy maiden Ariel, about whose marriage Aaron was rumored to be married. If they were to marry, it would cement Aaron's right to succeed to the throne. But until then, it wouldn't be a problem. The other dukes are also aware of Celine's bad behavior. Lucas is aware of this too. Lucas knew that everyone was keeping quiet about it because Ariel didn't want to attract the attention of the gossips. Lucas thought Selena would be a good duchess after all, but he realized she looked too calm today. Lucas was told she'd lost her memory, but he realized that something else had changed in her. He thought the past duchess would have screamed and wished to burn this whole hill to the ground, but he thought that if he did, at least the reputation of the principality wouldn't suffer. Lucas thought then that it would be even better if her memory didn't come back. At this point, Lucas told the protagonist that he was done. Selena thanked the guy. The main character remembered that of course Lucas is the one who fell in love with Ariel. Winter, when Selena turns 19. That day, Ariel, who was waiting for Aaron, was trapped by the Selena and faced a terrible cold. But Lucas rescued her. And then, despite everything, Ariel says goodbye to Aaron, who stood up for the Selena and falls in love with Lucas. And so Selena is 19 years old, springtime, a few months after that incident. The protagonist thought that perhaps Lucas perceived Ariel as nothing more than a fellow student at the academy. She thought that maybe now his relationship with Selena would improve. She realized that she was the chance. At this point, the protagonist started approaching the guy and was told that if he liked her. She moved even closer to the guy's face. It was like they were about to kiss. But the main character told the guy in his ear that they could be friends. Selena understood that there is Lucas, an honorable and distinguished writer of the ducal family, mourns at the funeral of the Duchess. She can avoid death. Therefore, it was not favorable for her to ignore Selena's request right now. She realized that if she got close to him, he would go to her funeral. The protagonist realized that what matters in friends is not quality, but quality. But at that point, Lucas said he was sorry, but they couldn't be friends. There was indifference on the protagonist's face. She said there was nothing to be done, but she said she was going to keep wanting it. At that moment, the protagonist realized that she had never had any friends. Since junior high school, it had been her duty to look after her sister after school. Even when it became part of society, nothing changed. And her parents wouldn't let her be friends with anyone. The stepmother asked the protagonist why she needed friends. She said she'd better keep an eye on her little sister. She said the protagonist's sister was a poor thing, and asked if she felt sorry for her. She asked why the protagonist had friends. Her parents told the protagonist that if she still wanted to call them mom and dad, she had to do what they said. Otherwise, they'd just kick her out of the family. The protagonist agreed with all of this without reservation, and even now she remembers them as father and mother. The protagonist realized she was abandoned anyway as soon as her sister died. She thought it wasn't surprising that Lucas had turned her down. The main character herself couldn't believe she was trying to make a friend. She looked up at the tower and thought it was all very troublesome. As a child, she often played video games secretly from her parents. There was one popular game among her classmates that they were always discussing, and enthusiastically began to play it. The protagonist, not knowing anything about it, immediately encountered a strong monster, and died from his first attack. Selena was stunned to see that her HP had dropped to 0 in an instant. This immediately dampened her interest in the game, and she just silently shut down the computer. And now the protagonist has an unexpectedly similar feeling, a feeling that she's finally grown cold to everything. Selena said it wasn't that bad. She said she finally made it to the top of the tower. Selena thought that if she rang the bell, the whole house would shake. It even made her laugh a little. This is the moment the protagonist apologized to the real Selena for not being able to grant her wish. Selena realized to herself that she was unlikely to be able to make people grieve at her funeral. And even more so, she wasn't sure she could bear to lie there with her eyes closed while she was mourned. Selena thought that besides the real Selena had seen what had just happened. She thought she'd had enough. The protagonist was even a little offended. She thought that even if she lived a long life, it wouldn't change anything. She thought that no matter how much she tried in her previous life, nothing would change. The main character didn't know if Selena still wanted to not die miserable. The protagonist decided that so she would do everything in her power. She wanted to make sure her death wasn't miserable, or at least painful and agonizing. Selena stood on the edge of the tower and looked down, but all she could read on her face was indifference. Selena closed her eyes and thought that Selena was a duchess after all. She thought she was a member of the ducal family, cared for and loved. The protagonist thought that as long as these people were around, at least they could grieve for Selena if she chose death. The protagonist said that's why it would be okay. She realized that it was pretty high up here. She realized that it was even higher than last time. The protagonist realized that here she was choosing death again. After that, her body began to fall downwards. Lucas was walking somewhere and thought there was something wrong with the Duchess. He knew that the accident had robbed her of her memory. He understood that this could explain the changes in her behavior and the fact that she had left her rooms for days. But he didn't understand what she was doing in the garden alone. And why did she suddenly want to be friends with him? Lucas knows Selena's temper, and it's not her style to suggest such a thing, but he thought she'd answered him too nonchalantly. Lucas didn't expect it to be like this. The guy didn't understand what this feeling of uncertainty was. At that moment, Lucas looked towards the bell tower and remembered that the protagonist was heading there. Lucas had a bad feeling, and he felt like he was missing something important. He thought that if the Duchess was a little disappointed at his refusal, she couldn't feel that way. Lucas realized she looked lifeless. At that moment, the boy realized something very important. With all his might, he began to rapidly approach the tower. After Lucas climbed to the top, he saw Selena. He rushed to her rescue in desperation, and unfortunately, or fortunately, he managed to do it. Lucas pulled the girl over and hugged her. Selena was shocked at what had just happened, but her expression went blank again and she said she was in pain. Lucas realized he had been holding the girl tightly and immediately let her go, causing her to fall awkwardly. Selena asked, wondering if he was following her. Lucas didn't understand why the girl was asking the question so nonchalantly. He finally fully realized that the main character had just tried to commit suicide. Lucas asked the girl if she had suddenly decided to die just because he had denied her friendship. Selena questioned what. She thought Lucas had lowered her HP to 0 because she couldn't be friends with him. The protagonist thought that the man who refused Selena Aiden was the servant. She thought that even if he was just a stranger, she would still be here. The protagonist realized that this was how it happened. She put the finishing touch on it. The protagonist looked at Lucas and wondered if he wouldn't answer, but she realized he was a good guy in every way. She realized that herself. The protagonist realized that Lucas believed that he could succeed at anything, and she thought he really could. The protagonist thought he was a talented and confident man. Selena thought that he probably now felt responsible for thwarting her suicide attempt. She thought that perhaps she should have waited a little longer before coming here. But she thought she didn't care. She said it wasn't his fault either. Lucas didn't believe the girl's words. He asked if she was telling the truth. Selena said she was. Lucas then asked why she was trying to jump off the tower. Selena thought the guy was a pain in the arse. She naturally realized that he had saved her, but she felt she had no right to ask her about it. At this point, the protagonist asked the guy if they were really that close that they were talking like that. But Lucas said it wasn't about how close they were. But at that point, Selena interrupted the guy. She said it wasn't his fault, so he'd better mind his own business. She said it was true that she tried to jump after he turned her down too, but she apologized, saying it was just a misunderstanding. She said that's why the guy just walks away. At this point, the main character thought her butt hurt because she fell on it. Lucas asked Selena if she wouldn't jump as soon as he left, but the main character said she wouldn't do it a second time in one day. She said it was too much. Of course, she knew she couldn't do it once, because death is not such a simple thing. Selena realized that even if you wanted to die when the time came, you would hesitate. She realized that if dying was so easy, she would have died when she was 15. The heroine was standing in front of the stairs down and thought her bottom hurt really bad. She thought maybe she had a cracked bone. She didn't understand how she was going to get down those stairs. Selena hoped Lucas would leave right now. She hoped he wouldn't follow her. At this point, Lucas sighed, and afterwards he walked over and took the main character in his arms. She asked if he was going to carry her, but Lucas smiled and said that if he didn't, they'd be stuck for 2 days. Told that girl not to come up here again. But Celine said she hadn't originally planned to come down this way. Lucas asked, and yet why? But Selena didn't understand what the claim was, but she thought it was easier this way. At that moment, lying in the arms of a guy, the protagonist fell asleep without a care. Lucas looked at her and didn't know what she was thinking right now. Later, Lucas brought the main character home and told her parents and brother everything. The Duke asked what the hell that meant. He said that Selena said she'd been wanting to go for a walk for a long time, so they were happy to let her go. He said they didn't suggest where it might lead. The Duke felt horribly sick at the realization that Selena herself had tried to jump off the tower. Everyone started trying to calm him down, but the Duke said he was fine. At that moment, the Duke came to the bed where the protagonist was sleeping and said that he only had one daughter. He asked the girl why she did that. Sometime later, when the protagonist woke up, the doctor examined her. He asked if she had any pain. Selena replied briefly that her bottom hurt. The doctor asked where exactly she felt discomfort, but the main character said that there was nowhere else but her arse. The doctor then asked why she tried to jump off the roof. Selena was angry and thought that maybe the man himself wanted to be thrown off the roof. Selena replied to the doctor that everything was somehow very troublesome. The doctor then finished his examination and went out to the Selena's relatives. He said she didn't have any serious injuries, but he said the girl seemed awfully restless. The doctor said she might need a change of scenery. Later, Selena's mom asked the doctor what she was so worried about. The doctor said that he asked her why she decided to do it, to which the girl replied that it was because everything was very troublesome. The doctor said that in any case, stress and fatigue after the memory loss had taken its toll, combined with emotional deficiency and stuff. He said it all built up inside her. The main character's mom was shocked. The Duke asked the doctor how they should feel about it, but the doctor said there's no effective way. He said all he can do is keep watching. He said that violent attempts to restore the memory would only make things worse. He said that if possible, the girl should not be left alone. He said that since they don't know yet what she might do. The Duke didn't know what to do. At this point, he turned to Lucas, and the latter asked what was wrong. The Duke said he wanted him to look after Selena. He said she was important to him. Lucas acquiesced silently to the Duke's request. Aaron asked Lucas to take care of his sister. He said he'd like to help too. He said it was probably his fault she was suffering. But Lucas smiled at Aaron and said he understood him. He told the boy not to worry. Lucas was the son of a baron, and only thanks to the Duke the sum to enter the academy. Moreover, the Duke had given him a room. The Duke and Duchess treated him, the same age as Aaron, like a son. Lucas believed that Aaron is his named brother, and also an important friend to him. Therefore, he knows how dear his sister is to him. But Lucas thought Selena must hate her brother. Lucas realized that Selena had told him not to feel responsible for her, but he realized that no matter what anyone said, He couldn't do that. The main character told Aiden to leave, but the guy said he wasn't allowed to. Selena realized that she had made a mistake yesterday, and had more problems as a result. She realized that it looked like they had introduced Aiden to her, as he had been closest to Selena before. But the protagonist knew that this guy really hated Selena to death. The main character wondered what if he killed her while she was sleeping during the day, but she didn't want to be killed. Aiden asked the main character if everything was okay, but Selena asked if he understood the meaning of the word leave. She asked if he could at least stop standing in a pole. The main character told the guy to sit wherever he wanted. She said his legs must be stiff by now. But Aiden thought it was a test and said he wasn't tired at all. But Selena said he might not be tired, but she was. She said it was unpleasant to be stared at all the time, so she asked the boy to sit down. Reluctantly, but Aiden agreed and did so. Afterwards, Selena settled down on the bed. At that moment, she realized how bored she was. She realized there was nothing in this world. Selena realized that she couldn't even find interesting books here, and she didn't even think about the internet. And to listen to music, you have to call a whole orchestra into the room. Selena realized that if only she hadn't made a mistake. Also, Lucas really pissed her off. But the protagonist decided not to get upset and thought that she will still have a chance. She thought she might die while they worked out the plan. She realized there was nothing to keep her here. But the protagonist realized that in order to die, she had to come up with a plan too. She realized that she didn't want a miserable death, but something that would be to her liking. The protagonist wondered what Selena would say to that. She thought it wouldn't be so troublesome. So the protagonist decided to wait for the next opportunity, and now she had time to sleep. The protagonist was looking out the window. She thought that reality was not a gift. She didn't understand why reality was so horrible. Selena thought that if she wasn't thinking about suicide, Aiden was still in her room, and the main male character visits her room every day. Selena wondered if there was a sign that said you could get brownies for attending. At this point, the protagonist asked Aiden if he had seen the sign on the door. The guy stood up and said he understood. He then peeked behind the doors and said the sign had been cleaned to a shine today during cleaning. The protagonist was puzzled and interjected. She said she would go outside for a while, and Lucas said he would go with her. Aiden said he would also accompany the girl. Afterwards, Selena strolled outside with the guys following her, and she thought that if she behaved well, the situation would improve. But it's been 5 days and still no change. Selena didn't realize if they hadn't calmed down over the days. She realized that on top of that, for 5 days her parents came to her room and cried. The protagonist didn't know what to do. She thought that if only she had been a little more serious in the beginning. She didn't understand why it made her lead such a strange life. At that moment, the protagonist saw her brother. She remembered that he was Selena's unhappy brother. Aaron asked the protagonist how her health was. Selena said she was fine. Aaron awkwardly said it was good. The protagonist was confused. She realized that Aaron was definitely worried about his sister, but since he knows her character, he doesn't say anything. She had crossed paths with Aaron for the first time in 5 days. He was careful not to disturb her. Selena couldn't believe he wasn't even showing his head. At this point, the protagonist asked her brother if he wanted to go for a walk with her. Aaron was confused and answered nothing. Selena said if he doesn't want to, it's no big deal. But Aaron said it was fine and he would of course walk with her. At this point, the protagonist turned to the guys and said that they would be back together too, so she would take a walk with her brother. Aaron told the guys he'd look after his sister so they could go back. Afterwards, the protagonist asked her brother how he was feeling. She said he just looked really tired. And he smiled and said he was fine. He thanked the protagonist for her concern, but Selena said I shouldn't. At this point, he asked Selena if her memory had returned. The main character said she's almost there. She said she's remembering slowly. Aaron asked her what she remembered, but the protagonist replied that she didn't quite remember yet. But she said she remembered, for example, that she hated her older brother. Aaron was experiencing a spectrum of different emotions. Selena realized he thought she was going to hate him again. And unfortunately, the main character is well aware of the victims who don't come back a second time. The protagonist realized that for Aaron, it was all in the name of love. For herself, she hadn't decided yet. But she knew that emptiness and pain. She also knew that he had not yet experienced the feelings of being abandoned. The protagonist thought it might be because she, unlike him. At this point, the protagonist apologized to her brother for hating him. The main character thought she understood Aaron's feeling better than the real Selena. Aaron stood puzzled and asked his sister what she had just said, but Selena apologized again for all the bad things she had done to him earlier. Aaron told his sister that it was very sudden. He wondered now since she wouldn't have any more suicide attempts. But Selena said she wasn't actually joking. She said she apologized sincerely from the bottom of her heart. Aaron realized that this was very unlike Selena. He thought that something had happened to her. He smiled at his sister and thanked her. At this point, Selena asked her brother how much longer they would be following her. She thought that maybe if her brother told them now, it wouldn't be as bad as they thought. Selena realized that it was because her brother had better relationships with others than she did. At this point, Aaron said that until she was fully recovered, though it was hard, she had to be patient. Celine realized that Aaron wasn't quite sure yet. She thought it was like standing in front of her parents. It was as if she were a little girl with high expectations. The protagonist realized that her brother wanted to be always loved, and so he was always trying to be good. He realized that he couldn't do anything if he was thinking of someone else. She didn't know what to do if he left her again. She realized there was nothing she could do. The protagonist knew the problem was that he wasn't showing it to other people. A man who wants to be loved shows weakness only to those he is sure of. The main character thought Erin's essence was just like hers when she was a child. The protagonist thought that if she could meet that self, she would take her hand and say, "Set aside all expectations, because at the end of the day these people don't appreciate you." But she realized that if she took Erin's hand now and told him that, what would be the reaction? But the protagonist decided to stop there. She realized that before she died, Selena had hoped that there would be at least one good person by her side. The protagonist thought that maybe she hadn't thought of Erin. The protagonist thought Selena was better at this than she was. At this point, the protagonist told her brother that she had a favor to ask of him. Later, Aaron tells his parents that the protagonist wants to meet the Holy Maiden Ariel. He said she asked him to meet. Duke said that if you consider what she did before. Duke said that moreover now she did lose her memory, but a few days ago there was an incident. The Duke asked if it would be right to let her meet the Holy Maiden Ariel. But Aaron assured his father that everything would be all right. He said she apologized to him and said she was sorry for what she had done. Aaron said that although not completely, her memory had partially returned to her. He said he was sure Ariel was, but he said if she said she wanted to meet, they couldn't just leave it at that. The Duchess agreed but said that Aaron must be present with them. Aaron agreed with his mum. After a while, the protagonist met with Ariel. Ariel said that she had been told that the Duchess wanted to meet her. The protagonist knew it was the Holy Maiden of the Franklin Empire. The heroine of this novel is Ariel Franklin. The main character thought Ariel actually looked like a heroine. Selena thought her brother looked really good with the girl. She realized that they even had similar faces and thought it must be fate. The protagonist realized that instead of making her brother the hero, the author was making the heroine fall in love with his close friend. Selena didn't understand why that was the case. She thought it was really cool, just like Hollywood. She thought it wouldn't even occur to her. But she thought, well, she's not the one in charge. I mean, not Selena, who has a husband like that. The main character looked at the couple and realized that they were really awkward. She thought they were embarrassed just like the bunnies. This is the moment the protagonist got up from the table. She bowed her head to Ariel and said that she apologized from the bottom of her heart for her terrible actions. The protagonist understood that when presenting or apologizing, you need to do it properly and as a proper adult. Ariel was surprised by the protagonist's actions. She said she wasn't worth the apology. She told the protagonist to get her head up sooner rather than later. But Selena said she'd never do anything like that again. She said she'd still like to bless them. The main character told the girl she was completely serious. She said she didn't think it was possible to believe that people were changing so quickly. But she said that when faced with death, she began to think about human life in a whole new way. Selena said that even if Ariel doesn't forgive her, she has no choice but to blame her. She said she just wanted to say that she wished them both happiness. At this point, Ariel smiled sweetly and thanked the main character. In a little while, the butler told the other servants they'd do a good job today. At that moment, he saw Aiden A. He asked if Mistress had been giving him a hard time lately. Aiden said he had. He said it was because she had suddenly lost her memory and was literally a different person. The other butler said he was glad it was so because Aiden was having a hard time. The maid said she was glad too because Aiden had defended them against his mistress's attacks. Only once did he take her anger out on him. The other servants expressed their gratitude to the guy for protecting them. Aiden said he was grateful to them too. But I said it's really amazing. She asked if it was possible to change so much just by losing one's memory. The servants began to assume that the protagonist was mentally ill, but the head butler said that servants are not supposed to pry into the affairs of their masters. Aiden didn't know if it was a personality change or if it was a mental disorder. Selena lay on the bed and realized that her brother had an engagement coming up. Uramani couple didn't even get married before they broke up. If only Selena had apologized, things would have got better so quickly. The protagonist mentally asked Nareel Selena how she and such. She realized that as soon as she called the princess and apologized, the two houses had immediately agreed on an engagement day. The main character decided to postpone suicide until later. She realized that if he died before this momentous day for his brother came, he would be no different from Selena, who had ended so miserably. At that moment, Lucas knocked on the room. The main character told him to come in. Lucas entered the room and asked Vasilina if she was going to spend today in bed too. But the main character said it's the safest place to be. She realized that it had been 2 weeks since Lucas had visited her bedroom. She didn't understand why he was looking at her like that or what he wanted from her. Selena realized that even though Lucas said he was worried, he was very pedestrian. She constantly felt like he was about to hit her. Selena said she'd be sitting here tonight then, but Lucas said a sedentary lifestyle is bad for your health. He said the girl needed to be in the sun at least a little bit, but Selena said that if you opened the curtains, you could sunbathe right here. But at that moment, the beau asked the girl she's not here because she's bothering to do anything else, is she? But Selena said she'd already said she was having trouble living, and they all did. But at that moment, Lucas interrupted the girl and yelled at her. The main character was confused by this because she didn't understand why he did it so suddenly. But this moment, Luca asked for forgiveness for his stupidity. And also, he asked to understand his feeling because he was worried about her health. Celine didn't realize what he had just said. She thought he was Oscar-worthy beyond a shadow of a doubt. Lucas is an accomplished liar. Especially in public, he is an airy gentleman with refined manners. But Selena knew that in reality, he was very calculating. Not counting the Don Dukes as Selena and the protagonist in this regard and the exception to the rule. The protagonist realized that if she didn't get up, his play wouldn't end. She thought she'd had enough of him. Selena realized she'd lost after all, but she thought it was a one-time thing, so she'd get out. At this point, the protagonist did not start to get up, but it was obvious that she was having a hard time doing so. Selena realized that apart from going to the loo, she had spent all her time in bed, and so her legs just weren't holding her up. At that moment, Selena turned to Lucas and asked if he could, but at that moment, she stopped half-heartedly. She realized that if she asked for a boyfriend now, there would only be more recriminations. At this point, the main character didn't ask Eden to come over. The guy came over and she asked for support. Afterwards, Eden helped the protagonist up and asked if she was okay. Celie thought the guy was an actor too. She thought she wouldn't believe he was seriously worried about her. But she thought that, however, he seemed to have a conscience, and besides, he was nice to her. Selena thought that when you compare the two of them, Lucas was a scoundrel. The main character didn't understand why the real Selena fell in love with such a type. At that moment, Aiden turned to the protagonist. Selena thought that understanding was part of being human, and she wants out of a life where she has everything. That said, she wanted to at least live longer somehow, even if she was going to be treated like a servant or slave. At that moment, the main character asked Aiden what his name was. The boy was surprised and asked again. The main character repeated that she asked what his name was. Aiden was surprised, but he said his name. Selena thought the guy had finally realized the real situation. The main character felt relieved. This is the moment Selena told him that someone like him. Aiden was surprised and asked what. But more importantly, the idea didn't realize that she had accidentally said the thought out loud. After a while on the street, the main character didn't tell the real Selenia to take a look. Next to her is the man who betrayed her, and a man eager to imprison her, and she skips along nicely with them. At that moment, the protagonist realized that the two men next to her were just incredibly handsome. Lucas has silver hair and puffy eyes and perfect facial features. Anyone would think he was Apollo. Selena thought it was natural. She realized that they were described as beautiful in the novel, and now she was seeing it for herself. Selena thought that Lucas must use his pretty face a lot. At this point, Lucas asked if something was wrong, but the main character said it's okay, and Aiden is a green-eyed blonde whose hair is so pure gold it's even annoying. The main characters didn't realize that if you think about it, this Aiden is much lighter than the Aiden she imagined reading the novel, but she didn't understand why he'd been so glum lately. In fact, Aiden couldn't believe that the main character didn't even remember his name. He realized on second thought that she was unusually evasive. The main character decides the guy wants a sweet tooth. At this point, Lucas told Selena that she needed more exercise, but the main character asked why that would be. Lucas said that young Mr. Aaron was engaged to be married. He said that if the girl showed up at the event so pale, she would make the guests worry. Selena said she understood and would try to get out more on walks. Lucas said it was also about nutrition. Selena was surprised and asked if she ate well enough, but Lucas told her to sit up straight when she ate. He said that at least she should eat sitting down at the table. Selena said to then have Lucas pass it on to the ducal couple too. She said that was the end of his work and she would go back to her room. Selena said to another guy to stop his act. She asked if he thought she didn't notice. She said she didn't feel good about it. Afterwards, the main character told Aiden why that they were going back to the room. Come on, at this point, Lucas told the girl that he'd lost his memory. She'd changed so much that she stopped showing her emotions. He said it was as if her initiatory gaze had become even faster than before. Now the guy was very curious to the point that even without the request of Aaron and the Duke's consorts, he would still keep an eye on the girl. After a while, the protagonist was sitting at a table full of goodies with Eden. She turned to him and asked why he wasn't eating. The main character asked if he was nervous, but Aiden hastened to reassure the girl and said it wasn't true. But the main character realized that the guy was really nervous. At this point, Selena said that she had decided that from now on she would walk and eat with him. He said she chose him and the others disgusted her. Aiden said that unlike Lucas, he didn't have the power to protect her. He said that if something happened. But at that moment, the main character interrupted him and said that he could use magic. At this point, Selena said she accidentally said too much. She realized this was problematic as the guy appeared to be one of those who openly shows his emotions. Aiden made an innocent face and said he didn't know what the girl was talking about. Selena didn't understand if he still intended to hide it. She thought he should have realized by now that he'd given himself away. Seely told the guy to eat faster because he loves desserts. At this point, Aiden asked the girl if he could ask him something. Selena asked what was wrong. Aiden said she didn't remember his name either. He asked why she thought he liked cakes. But Selena said that she knew that the two weighty ones, the cook and the maid, whom he diligently takes care of, bring him cakes every time something happens. At this point, the main character remembered how it was written in the book. The unhappy servant was afraid of being thrown out into the cold again, and clung to the Dukes from behind with all his might. Also, every time the lady bullied him, the servants of the ducal household took pity on him, and seemed to share with him the high-class treats from the aristocrats' table. At this point, the heroine tasted the chocolate cake. The only flavor of cake she knew in her past life was chocolate cake. Once the main character came to the hospital to visit her younger sister with a chocolate cake, and she let her try a piece. The main character never once thought that the cake was delicious. She just took a piece because her sister liked it. She was just laying it on because she had to, and she didn't have her tongue from how sweet it was. Therefore, the main character could not understand whether she liked him or not. Tasty or not tasty didn't bother the girl, she just ate it. The main character would have liked it to be part of a family holiday, but she just took big bites of cake, laughing like a robot. Selena didn't understand why she hadn't realized it before she was here. She thought she was stupid. She thought she didn't know anything about herself after all. At that moment, Aiden asked the girl if she was all right. He said she was very pale. At this point, Selena said she didn't hate chocolate cake. Aiden said that then, with the girl's permission, he would take this chocolate cake. After that, Aiden switched desserts. After that, the protagonist tasted the guy's dessert. At this point, wondered why the girl's mood had changed so drastically, and why she's been looking at him like that sometimes since she woke up. Look like you've left the world. Like an abused child. At this point, Selena said the dessert was delicious. She said that this cake had good flavor too. Aiden said that since Mistress was joking, but he asked if she'd tried them like that many times. The boy thought she was back to her usual form, but he didn't understand why he was so calm then. But Selena said it was the best cake she'd ever tasted before. At this point, she asked the guy if everything was okay. After that, Aiden ate a piece of chocolate cake. He said that of all the ones they've tried before. Selena asked if the cake he had tasted today wasn't the most delicious for him. Aiden said it was of the most delicious flavor. Aiden told the girl that now when they bring her a cake she doesn't want to eat, just let her call him. He said he would be happy to receive them. So he asked her not to make such a sad face anymore. The next morning, the maid woke up the main character by telling her to wake up. Selena barely opened her eyes and asked what time it was. The maid said it was 6 in the morning. The maid asked if I wasn't Mr. Aaron's engagement ceremony today. The protagonist said that's how it is. She said it shouldn't take long. After the main interview was bathed. Then the maid brushed her hair. After a while, the main character realized something. She realized that the engagement ceremony had everyone fussing even more than usual. Looking around, Selena realized that no one had any free time. But she realized that instead of holding the wedding in the Imperial Palace, instead, they had decided to hold the Beck combination ceremony in the halls of the Ducal Manor, so it was no wonder they were all so busy. At that moment, Aiden came into the room and said that the jewelry he had ordered had arrived. But this was the moment he noticed the Selena being harvested. In surprise, the boy stammered. The maid ran up to him and took the box. She said it was very marvelous and just in time. She thanked the guy and wanted to look at him. But where he was standing, he was gone. Aiden ran out into the corridor. It was the first time he'd seen her change clothes, even though he'd visited her in the bedroom before. But he didn't realize what it felt like. Today, Selena realized for the first time how carefree her days had been since she had been reborn as the daughter of the aristocrats in this world. She thought the sunny ones looked at her like predators stalking prey. Enough of the moment the maid showed the last 5 left after 72 days of carefully selecting dresses. She said the main character chose one of them, but Selena said she wanted my left one. Racing said to give the main character a close look. Afterwards, she told Selena to choose matching shoes to match the dress from these 5 groins. The main character said she also wanted the leftmost ones. After the situation repeated itself with the gloves, the main character thought it was really tiring. She had never had to dress up like this before, and of course, she didn't know how best to be when she was suddenly told to choose between the two. At this point, the racing one asked the protagonist why not admire herself for a bit before they choose a gem. Well, after the protagonist looked in the mirror, she was surprised. She thought she'd never get used to that alien face, but she couldn't remember what her real face was. She realized she couldn't remember. Her face was completely erased from her memory, but she thought that would cover it, for it is customary to forget the faces of the dead. At this point, the protagonist wondered what the usual facial expression of a real Selena was. At that moment, it smiled wickedly. The maids were all freaked out by the creepy smile. Selena realized that with so many people around, she better not grimace like that. The maid asked if everything was okay. She asked then which stone was better. Selena was also going to say the left one, but Lucas interrupted her and said that he thought the right one would be fine. The protagonist asked him if knocking is not customary, but Lucas said the door was open. The main character explained that the servants had forgotten to close it, because they were all preoccupied and they were running back and forth. The main character thought that if she said it straight, Lucas would understand. But she realized she'd given him a reason to take off his mask instead. The main character asked Lucas if he thought he didn't need him to accompany her to the wedding. But Lucas told Selena he wanted to be with her. But the main character said she didn't want to. But Lucas replied with a smile that even if she did, she had no choice. Selena thought that at least he'd stopped being a gentleman. She thought that whenever she went out, he'd appear out of nowhere and act defiant. She thought he'd become too clingy. At this point, the maid told the protagonist that they were done. Then the main idea was not to look in the mirror where I saw a real beauty. Na told the maid she looked beautiful and thanked them for their work. At that moment, she realized that you maids looked very frightened. She realized that if it had been the real Selena, she wouldn't have said that. When the maid left the room, they discussed that the main character was the first to praise them. The protagonists felt sorry for them. Selena looked at Lucas, who was smiling, and wondered how he managed to smile so naturally. She thought that if she smiled, she would look clumsy. She thought maybe she should take lessons from him on how to smile effectively. Selena asked the guy why he was here today. She asked him if he could see that she wasn't planning to go out as she was busy preparing for her engagement. But Lucas asked permission to accompany the girl tonight. He said he came in advance, he didn't tell her. But the main character said there was no need for that. She said she would ask Aiden to do it. But Lucas said that he was a mere servant, and even if he was close to the Duchess, it was unacceptable. He said that if she was accompanied by a mere servant, the girl would make an unpleasant impression on the public. The main characters realized that social class was to blame for everything. She realized how things work in this world. She realized that Mistress could arrange an engagement without lifting a finger. Celine realized that Aiden was always left behind, and sometimes he just stares at everything, standing outside the window. And sometimes he walks away from it all. Selina wondered this time and this time too. He too was not allowed in. The aristocracy was gathering. At this point, Selina asked Lucas what it was about treating like rubbish. At this point, she said she wasn't talking about a bloke. She was talking about aristocrats. But Lucas said he and she were aristocrats. The main character said that then they too are just like rubbish. Lucas said it looks like... Selina thought that even though Lucas was the main character, he was laughing like a villain. She changed her mind about the lessons of the spectacular smile. But I didn't understand what the guy needed and thought that if he was done with the details, then let him go. At this point, the main character said she had something to do before the ceremony, and she asked if Lucas could get Aiden before he left. But Lucas said it wasn't necessary since Aiden had been standing outside the door the whole time, and entered as soon as the Duchess called him. Aiden wondered as if it was rubbish. Yes, he thought that probably Mistress didn't know what real rubbish was. Cold, painful, scary. Goodness, warmth, hope, all these were just words from a child's fairy tale for them. Well, then the main character went up to the guy and said he had a pretty cute face. She asked if he'd go to her. The mistress before him was like a ray of light. That year the winter had been so harsh that many children had simply frozen us to death. Squeezing his outstretched hand, Aiden thought he could still live. He thought he would never let go of that hand. He thought that maybe this beautiful girl would take him to a world like a child's fairy tale. His savior angel. And then that illusion shattered in an instant. Selina threw various objects at the guy, asking if he can't even do that. Aidan was given to be the personal servant of the lady. He was only a lightning rod for her anger. And yet the first time they met, she had reached out to him with a smile. She asked from now on he would obey only her. She said he followed her everywhere she went. She said she picked him up and now he's hers. Then those words gave Aiden hope and warmed him. Growing up young, Mr. Aaron always showed himself to be the heir to the Earl's family. Selina, however, captivated by a feeling of envy, could no longer conceal her cruel character. Selina threw the book on the floor and said that she was learning from the same books. She asked why her brother knew more different things than she did. She asked Aiden if he hadn't picked up all the books this week. She asked how many volumes Aaron had received. But Aiden said he found it difficult to answer anything about Mr. Aaron's training. Afterwards, Selina called the guy useless. She said she flew him in against all odds, so he must be of some use to her. Aiden asked what he would do. He said he'd do anything. Selina asked if he wouldn't understand unless she chewed him out. She told him to find out what books his brother was studying so that next week at the family dinner, she'd show up better than he did. But she said Aiden better turn those books off. Aiden tried to object to something, but the heroine's main point is that he can't do it. She pushed him and said he really wasn't good for anything. She said she wished she hadn't picked him up. She said she'd had enough because the bloke couldn't even serve tea, and she said she didn't want to see him anymore and tell him to go away. Aiden had no other options but to agree. It was humiliating and unbearable to endure the insults and beatings and day in and day out. Aiden stared out the window and thought that if it weren't for his mistress, he'd probably be lying by the side of the road, frozen to death. Aiden told himself to hang in there, because he thought it was lucky that the winter winds wouldn't touch him. He thought that at least he had a bunk here. But at the age of 17, he suddenly thought what a difference from those times when he was begging on the street. It was the day when it became known that young Master Aaron would graduate from the academy as the best student of all. Mistress was in a fit of rage, tearing the room to splinters. Selina asked Aiden what the look on his face was. She asked if he was even thinking about what he could do for her. She said if he didn't, make him disappear. She threw him the box and asked him if he was deaf. But the box smashed the guy's head and he bled. Selina realized what she'd done, but Aiden calmly asked the girl if she was okay. Selina was shaking with fear and said the guy had blood on his face. But Aiden said it was all right. But he said that if he stayed like that, the mistress wouldn't be able to rest. She said it would be unforgivable on his part. Aiden left the room and said he'd get someone else. Then something broke in the lad. He was overwhelmed by an unquenchable purple desire to kill Mistress. And then, along with the anger, tears were suddenly shed. When he suffered beatings on the road and when Selly humiliated him, all these long years he did not hurt a tear. He was sick of feeling betrayed, but Aiden thought it was very foolish and too late to feel betrayed. A moment Aiden saw the magic. He thought the scream of his soul had turned to magic. At that moment, the boy realized that he had mage blood in his veins. He wondered if he could kill his mistress with this magic. He wondered what the look on her face would be like when she found out that her useless servant had magical powers. I wondered when she would realize that she would meet her horrible end from this power. He wondered how he would feel at that moment. Aiden didn't know what would become of him, but he decided he'd keep his magic skills a secret. At first, he thought about visiting the wizard's tower and asking if they would accept him. He doesn't even know if his magical power is of any use, but he realizes that if he acts recklessly, he'll be rejected from the tower and maybe even kicked out of the ducal house. So Aiden decided to do the pragmatic thing, to hide his magical power and just endure further as he had done before. It was hard on his heart that Mistress's attitude towards him had become a little softer since that incident, but the guy thought it was all very cheesy. Aiden thought that even though Selena had lost her memory, it was ridiculous to hear her say that. He didn't know what the hell she was up to. A moment while talking to her brother, the main character fell to her knees. Aiden didn't understand what was going on in her head. Selena told her brother what he had said before, that he was sorry for everything, but she said that now, every time he apologized, she would get on her knees and insist on her guilt. She said that if he apologized to her, I would think that she was disrespecting her older brother. Aaron wanted to apologize, but just said he would try not to apologize again. The main character said that anyway, she congratulates him on his engagement today. She said she came in advance to congratulate everyone before the ceremony started. Aaron, thank your sister. Aiden thought that meant she needed to congratulate everyone in the family. Then the main character went to the princess's room. Afterwards, she went to her parents' house. The main character realized that the Herzogs always look at her with eyes that love Selena, but not her. It's only when she's around them that she feels guilty. That's why the protagonist can't call them mom and dad. The protagonist thought that what a shock it would be when they found out that she was not their daughter, but a stranger who had borrowed her body. So the protagonist has no desire to see them. However, she realized that she had to fulfill her duty to them. The main character knocked on the room and said it was her. She thought she looked like a parent and decided to leave. But at that moment, the Duchess opened the door. She got very excited and hugged the Selena. The Duchess said it was a lovely day since the protagonist was finally visiting, but Selena thought they'd had dinner together last night. The Duke also came out of the room and asked the protagonist if she had come to offer congratulations before the ceremony. He laughed and said she was a good girl. He said it was the best day of their lives. Gentle voices and eyes filled with love, gestures of friendliness and warm words of greeting. All the things the main character couldn't get. She is touched by such unexpected affection and love, but the protagonist told herself to calm down because she is not the real Selena. The main character thought that this couple wanted to see their real daughter, not her. She thought that even though this was her new life, their love did not belong to her. The main character felt that she should realize her position. At this point, the main character addressed the Duke and Duchess as mom and dad. The parents were surprised and asked what was wrong. The Duke said that it seemed that the girl's memory was slowly returning. The main character didn't thank them for welcoming her so warmly, thanked them for taking such good care of her. The Duchess asked the girl what she was saying because she was their daughter and it was natural. The Duke said that on the eve of her older brother's engagement, Selena is also at last an adult. It is a peaceful and fulfilling gratuitous love. The protagonist thought that's probably what children get from their parents. She didn't understand what was wrong with Selena. She didn't understand what she was so unhappy about, that she disobeyed her parents and hated her brother. The main character realized that all the things she'd dreamed of she couldn't have had were all Selena's. The main character didn't understand why she was in the girl's body after all. And suddenly Kirito became so alien. When the main character convinced him in the beginning, there was nothing remarkable about him, so she didn't realize what had changed now. At this moment, Selena asked Eden she had, after all, first met him on that dark road, lying broken and battered. Aiden smiled and said he did. She said she also threw the box at him, and his head wound bled. Without smiling, the guy said it was true. He said it happened too. Selena thought then that this was indeed the world she had read about in the novel. What she'd just checked out was how it was in the novel, and no matter how many times the protagonist checked, she became more and more convinced that she was in the body of the very Selena from the novel. Figured she didn't belong here. Even in this space and for these people, thought that if she died in a couple of days, the main character didn't realize why she needed this warmth and why she needed to hold on to these countable hopes, in a world she wouldn't get used to. Everything irritated her, even this world. That's why she... At this point, the protagonist started falling down the stairs. After a second, Aid realized what had happened and threw himself to save the girl. But he didn't have time to grab her. Selena realized that on second thought, Even from Aiden, as she could get no apology, no ingratitude. The protagonist thought that if there was anyone Selena would favor, it would be Aiden. She didn't understand why he looked so angry then, but she thought he was sad on the contrary. At this point, I thought the guy had really nice golden hair, and at that moment, Aiden used magic to save the protagonist. After taking her in his arms, Selena realized that if she fell down those stairs, she'd break her neck. Aiden asked the girl if she was okay. Well, the heroine closed him down with vodka and asked why he saved her. At this point, other services started getting used and asking what happened and if the main character was okay. Selena said she's fine thanks to Aiden for catching her. The maid said the girl's dress was wrinkled and offered to go back to the room and fix it right away. Aiden told the main character that he'd go get the maids then. At this point, the main character asked the guy when he saved her and used magic. She told him not to worry and it's okay because she doesn't blame him for it. But Aiden said he'd call the maids. The main character wondered why the guy saved her. Selena didn't understand and why the hell she was complaining. She thought Selena lived on such a whim, not worrying about other people's opinions. She didn't understand why Aitana's eyes were so blank now. Aiden wondered why he had saved the main character, a girl who was just humiliating him. He realized he could have killed her. Aiden didn't know if he could really kill her, but he thought he couldn't bear to watch her die. The moment he looked at her falling, he realized that from their first meeting when she'd reached out to him, from that moment until now, he never once really wanted to kill her. At that moment, Aiden burst into the room like a protagonist. He had one wish. Aiden tried to say something, but at that moment, Lucas entered the room and told the girl that it was time for the ceremony to begin, and he had come to escort her. He said her hair was disheveled. Lucas told Aiden that the protagonist seemed to need a maid to get her into proper shape, asked why Aiden froze. The guy apologized and said he was on his way, but at that moment, Selena told him to stop. She asked if he didn't want to tell her something, but the guy apologized and said it was okay, but Lucas didn't think that was really true. Afterwards, Lucas led the main character to a table and asked her to take a seat. A servant told Aiden he was running late. At that moment, the head butler announced that the guests of the party would now come out. He asked them to give them a round of applause. After that, all the people in the audience started clapping. After that, Aaron walked out with Ariel. Aru smiled and waved to the Selena, but the main character thought he didn't need to smile at her like that because she wasn't the real Selena. She thought she'd leave right away. At that moment, Aaron noticed that something was wrong with his sister. At that moment, the protagonist waved back at the couple. Selena whispered quietly for the princess to take care of her brother. After a while, so Lucas told the main character that it looks like she's getting tired. The main character asked where the chair was. She realized that after becoming a Selena, it was the first time she had to stand for such a long time. At that moment, Lucas told the protagonist that her exit was imminent. He told her to do her best. At that moment, the girls noticed the main character and got very excited. The main characters didn't realize that Lucas ran when he was needed. She didn't realize that I was a chaperone. She didn't really understand any of that, so she didn't say anything. Here's the moment an unknown girl greeted the main character and said they hadn't seen each other in a while. She said she heard that she wasn't feeling well, but the main character replied that it wasn't that sad, but she still thanked the girl for her concern. The unknown girl said that it was natural that she was worried. The main characters didn't realize that this was the girl's normal reaction. She thought that if there was a turnover, she would be sad. The unknown girl thought that although she had heard that Selena had lost her memory, it felt like a different person now. Moment unknown. A girl asked the protagonist if she remembered her name. She said her name was Vivian Jonas from the family of Count Jonas. She said that their house mainly sells clothes. At that moment, C apologized to Vivian. She realized that it looked like the girl was trying to get close to her, the Duke's daughter, before her memory came back. But she thought that even if she succeeded, the only thing she would get was an invitation to the funeral soon. This is the moment another girl named Mia loudly applauded the main character. The main characters didn't remember that this girl is the daughter of the Marcus family. In the novel, she was the villain and Selena's right-hand woman. The protagonist remembered that she seems to have played a role in shaping Square on Baja's character of Selene. The protagonist did not think that she was indirectly responsible for Selena's death. At this point, the main character apologized to the girl, but said that her memory hadn't fully returned yet. Mia said that means the main character wasn't feeling well after all, but she said not to worry because the protagonist would definitely get better soon. Mia said that she would also remember that they were her only friends. Mia asked Vivian, didn't she? And Vivian confirmed it. Mia said that's why she wanted to have a leisurely chat with her friend, and asked Vivian if she would give up her seat. Mia then asked the main character if she really lost her memory or if she was up to something interesting. But Selena said it seems like they used to be really close, but she said she doesn't remember anything now, so it's not a little awkward for her right now. I was surprised that the main character said what she said. She said don't talk like they were nothing to each other. She said they were like sisters. Mia thought the protagonist was just taking it out on her, calling out to ask if Selena knew how hard she was trying to gain her trust. Mia thought as she joined her in bullying the weak, gave her expensive gifts, and told her nothing but flattery. But Mia believed that Selena was evil by nature, and believed that if she created the right situation, she would remember everything. That's when she said her throat was dry and she was thirsty. At this point, she called Aiden over and said it had been a while. She told him to bring her a glass of lemonade from there. The guy agreed and said he would. After that, Mia looked at the main character and winked at her. Selena didn't understand why Mia was winking at her. Aiden then brought the girl a glass of lemonade and she told him to move faster. But when Aiden handed it to Mia, she purposely spilled lemonade all over herself. After that, the girl started feeling sorry for Mia because her dress was ruined. Mia started yelling at the guy and asked if he knew how much the dress cost. But Aiden apologized. Mia asked, so he says sorry for him. Aiden thought he knew this was how it would end. Mia asked him if he thought he could get away with apologizing to them like that. She said he's a penniless lowlife. She said he had only been able to live this long because of Selena, and so he should do his job properly. She asked if he still wanted to move outside. She said he could use his girlish face in that case. Mia told Aiden to do what he had to do. She asked if he knew what she was talking about. She asked if he thought she had forgotten everything because they hadn't seen each other for a long time. She told the guy to get on his knees. Aiden started to kneel down again, repeating that he was sorry. But at that moment, the main heroine stopped him. Mia looked at the main character in surprise. Selena told Aiden not to stand up. The main character told Maya that listening to her profanity was so disgusting that she thought her ears would rot. The main character said that today there will be an important engagement ceremony for the Duke, the eldest son of the Hovite family and the holy maiden Ariel. She asked why make such a fuss. At this point, Mia started to make excuses and said she was the victim. She said Aiden spilled lemonade on her clothes. But Selena said the guy didn't do anything, and she saw Mia spill lemonade on herself. She thinks the girl just didn't notice at first that it was about to pour in the glass. Mia was startled and asked what the girl was saying, but the main character said they would listen to the other ladies' comments. She said she was now embarrassed by her first impression of them. The other girls began to confirm that Mia had done it herself. Mia was desperate and asked the protagonist why. She said that Selena might not remember, but that Servant was her toy. She said what she's doing now is nothing like her. The main character said that as the girl had just said she didn't remember any of it at all, but she asked if there was a need to behave like that now. She said that maybe they should charge them a congestion fee for inappropriate behavior. Mia asked the protagonist what she was saying since they were friends. She said that's why, maybe when she gets her memory back, she'll be the same. Mia asked Selena so she didn't think she was wrong. The protagonists asked if they were friends. She said then from now on they are no longer them. Selena told Mia not to even try to reconnect. At that moment, Lucas approached the girls and apologized for intruding on the conversation. He told the protagonist that it was right to come back because she didn't look good. The protagonist said that doing so was an improvement on the idea. She said that she always wanted to attend the wedding of her dear brother, but she didn't think she would last longer. Lucas said it was awful and then he would walk the girl to her room. At this point, the protagonist turned to Aiden. She told him to go with them. For a few seconds, the guy stared at the protagonist in surprise without saying anything, but Selena asked him what he was worth. She told him to go faster. After when they were leaving, the protagonist told Aiden why that he shouldn't always kneel down, following someone else's example of carrying drinks like a fool. Aiden smiled and said he didn't expect that from a girl. Selena interjected what he had just said. She asked if Anna was going to ignore her orders. She said she thought she had the highest status here, to the exclusion of the other members of her family. At this point, the main character said that a tangerine is not a tangerine. The people in the audience looked at her in bewilderment. The main gay thing was she didn't realize what it was. She thought people laughed. And at that moment, all the people in the audience except Mia started laughing. The main character asked Aiden whether he understood or not. Aiden smiled and said yes. Mia thought it was an absolute lie. She couldn't believe that the relationship she had worked so hard to build with the Duchess was crumbling. At that moment, Misha noticed from her father. At that moment, the girl's father told the men that he thought it was time to go home. The men agreed and said they would prepare the carriage right away. But one of the men asked what about Mia. He asked if they would not take her. But the girl's father said that it was not necessary and asked to inform her that they would get home separately. The protagonist had a dream. She thought Selena was being very cruel and didn't understand what she was afraid of flooding with tears. Selena tries to say something, but the protagonist thinks she's always saying something, but she can't hear her voice. The protagonist has no idea what she is saying. She said to wait because it would all be over soon. She said that she had put her worldly life in order as best she could, and would soon follow her, so she thought the girl wasn't in such a hurry. But Selena was trying to stop the protagonist. The protagonist didn't realize that this body couldn't rest until it was dead. That's when the protagonist woke up. She thought that when she dies and they meet, she will properly kick the girl's arse. The next day in the morning, the main character looked at the sun and thought that when she first woke up here it was spring, but now it was summer. At that moment, Lucas asked her if she had finished cooking yet. He asked how she was feeling because the main character was pale. Selena said she was still tired after the engagement ceremony. Lucas asked incredulously, even though she'd spent a few days in bed after the ceremony. But it's just that the main character has been dreaming all this time with the crying ghost of Selena. At this moment, the maid asked the protagonist if they really didn't accompany her. Selena said she was fine. She said she wanted to take a walk without attracting too much attention. Before that, she told her parents she wanted to go for a walk. She said she wanted to go to the puddle to get her memory back, and her mom told her that if she took Lucas with her, but she could go. The main character thought that thanks to the Duke's consort, who was worried about Selena, it was decided that Lucas would go with her. At this point, Lucas walked over to Aiden and said that he had told the Duke that he lady would be back before it got dark. Lucas also told the guy he was an open book elephant. He said he had some control over his emotions, if he doesn't want the people around him to notice it. Aiden asked the guy what he meant, but Lucas told him to be careful for the honor of his mistress, and for his own sake. After in Korea, the main character asked Lucas why he was having so much fun. She didn't understand if he wasn't feeling well because he had something wrong with his face. Lucas said he's annoyed by someone, but it's his behavior that annoys him even more. Selena told the guy that it's okay, and however, he's still a good guy. She said he knew better than anyone that he was human himself. Lucas was angry, but said the girl's words touched him to the core. Well, that's when the carriage hit a rock and shook. It caused the main character to bump her tailbone. Lucas asked her if everything was okay, but the main character said he asks her every time he sees her if she's okay. But Lucas said she doesn't feel good every time they meet. But the main character said it's just bad luck. Afterwards, when they were walking through the city, Lucas noticed that the main character wasn't feeling well and asked if everything was okay. He asked why she was diving into the crowd and lunging at passers-by. At this point, Selena suggested that the guy go to another place first. She said that there were so many people here that she felt dizzy. Then they came to a place where there were almost no people. The protagonist thought that this was the first time in her life that she had ever been a tourist, and she wondered if she was getting sick from the crowds again. The main character realized that just because her younger sister was ill and couldn't go to school, her parents wouldn't even let her go on school trips. At this point, Lucas put a face to the protagonist's face and said he was worried. He said that's why he asks her how she's feeling every time he sees her. At this point, the protagonist turned to the guy and said that she hadn't had a chance to tell him this before. She said that recently he's been calling her just Selena. She said he's stopped being preferable to her. Lucas from the novel always portrayed the same loving and perfect manners were an integral part of him. The main character didn't understand why he was becoming more and more familial with her, and she thought maybe it was because Aaron was his friend. At this point, the main character asked the guy if he wanted to be friends with her. Lucas was surprised and asked again, but the main character repeats that she asks if he wants to be her mate. Lucas smiled and asked why they shouldn't be friends. The main character refused and told the guy to stop. Lucas said it was too bad and asked where they would start their walk from. Selena said they'd go to the crowded places first. After all, she is looking for suitable places where she will meet her death. The protagonist believed that it was necessary to find a quiet and hidden from human eyes places as much as possible. The main character was looking at the clock tower and thought it was pretty tall. Lucas told her it was the only clock tower in the duchy. He said that unfortunately he wouldn't let her go up there, so she didn't have to do anything stupid. But Selena said she didn't intend to. At this point, Lucas said that the main character often eats commoners' street food. He said he was concerned, but the main character said that this food is also delicious and she likes it. Selena realized that initially she had no choice and did what she was given. At that moment, the protagonist heard a scream. A man was shouting at someone and asking if he thought it would normally be enough. An unknown man shouted at the child and asked him how he could pay for the scratched carriage. He said he must have nothing since he was wearing nothing. The boy apologized to the man, but the man said he would teach him not to get in front of other people's carriages. Lucas was upset about what was going on. He thought that wherever he went, the aristocrat would be happy in the car park. He suggested that Selena go before more people gathered. But this is the moment the heroine asked Lucas if he would stop the man if he swung his cane at her. Lucas said of course. Well, at that moment he realized what the question was about and asked the girl what she was up to. Selena couldn't believe she had witnessed such a sight. She remembered something from a long time ago. Memories she tried desperately to push out of her mind. But someone was trying to shield her from them, so she felt she couldn't just stand by and watch now. At this point, the protagonist got between the man and the guy and asked the man to stop. The man asked who the hell she was, and told her to fuck off. Well, that's when Lucas came up to him and told him to watch his mouth. The man assumed that the main character was an aristocrat and said he just wanted to teach this kid a lesson. He said that they aristocrats should punish mistakes, and if they don't, what happens to the morals of society? People started discussing that it was the man himself who was speeding and the boy was at fault. But at that moment, the protagonist snatched the cane from the man. After hitting her knee, she broke the cane into 2 pieces. The man started shouting at the girl and asked what she was doing. He asked how an unfavorable girl could be an aristocrat. He said he would call the guards right away. But Selena said it would be nice. She said that when the guards came, she'd tell them he'd hit her with that cane. The man asked her what she was talking about because she had just broken it. But the main heroine said that the man also tried to shift the blame on the boy, even though he almost hit him at a great speed. She said she would just do the same thing to him. At this point, Lucas laughed. People got bolder and started saying that the aristocrat had himself to blame. They told Selena that they would confirm her words with the guards. They said not to worry because they would support her. At that moment, Lucasa asked the man what he would do. He asked if he would call the guards. The man got angry and asked the girl if she even knew who he was. He started walking and said she was lucky he had business and so would let them go. Then the main character asked and turned to the boy. She said that there are many strange people in this world, so she said that the boy should be more careful in the future. Lucas told Selena that she was the weirdest one here at the moment. He said it was time for them to leave. After that road, Lucas looked strangely at the protagonist. Selena asked what was wrong. Lucas asked if her knee hurt. She said she didn't like pain, but she threw it away. But the main character said he didn't really mean to break the cane. She said that she was just getting frustrated and couldn't stop. The main character told Lucas she wanted to go home. He said that they would then head for the carriage yard on a road where there were fewer people. But the main character said she didn't have to and could take the shortest road. Lucas asked if she could handle it if they went through a crowded place. Selena said yes and added that she was very tired. Lucas said it's a police sighting. He said they'd better hurry up then, right after he gets rid of the rats. Selena was surprised, because she didn't know where the bandits had come from. She couldn't remember if it was in the novel or not. But she thought Lucas would sort it out. Lucas told the main character to get behind him. That's when he approached the bandits and handed them the money. He said it was all they had on them. He said if that's enough, they'll just part ways peacefully. The main character realized that the guy is trying to avoid violence because she's there for him. But at that moment, the head of the bandits said that money alone would not be enough. Lucas asked and what else they needed. The leader of the bandits told that he was assigned to catch one blue girl who pretends to be an aristocrat and gives a lesson. Lucas said that in other words, they just don't know their place. Do they dare say they'll take this lady while he's a knight? Said they should be prepared to give their lives. He told them not to complain later. At this moment, the bandits felt the bloodlust on them. That's when the main character realized what kind of face Lucas has when he's serious. She felt that there was a different atmosphere around now. At this point, the main character told the guy that she thought her parents would be very worried if she massacred the place. The main characters didn't realize that the Duke would immediately know if someone died once she was attacked. He would ban her again. Lucas told the bandits that today was their lucky day. He said they could consider that the main character had saved them. He said that now they were gone. The bandit leader asked the guy if he was being bullheaded. He started shouting to his team that Lucas Cebu was alone. He told everyone to stop shaking with fear. After that, the bandits swarmed to attack. Lucas pulled the protagonist over and hugged her apologetically. After that, the fight began. The main character didn't realize that Lucas had pressed her right up against his chest so hard that it was hard for her to breathe. Lucas said it was harder to fight this way. The main character said that he should just let her go then. But Lucas didn't and continued to fight like this. At that moment, he told Selena to hug him tightly and not let go. The bandits thought Lucas was trying to use the girl for the score. But they thought she was no longer a liability. The maid told Jane she was real. Jane said there's no room for cattle in the house, is there? She said she has been working here for 10 years and can't let them breed. The other maid said it was adorable, but Aiden told Jane to put the chair back down and he'd take it out. After Aiden took the roof outside, he placed it on the ground, after which he used magic. After the beauty and Aiden said she was lucky to survive Jane's punch. He apologized but said he couldn't fully heal his injuries. He said he didn't know much about healing magic. He said he'd have to learn it in the future. Lucas thought he was just a servant. He remembered Lucas saying something like that, a servant who doesn't know his place. But lastly, Aiden told Crisis not to dare to meddle in the ducal house again, because next time Jane might finish him off. At this point, the guy decided that he needed to get himself together because Mistress mustn't find out how he felt. He didn't care if the whole world mocked him. But Aiden realized that if the protagonist looked at him with contempt, he wouldn't stand for it. The main character realized that it's not easy to hold on at the same time while trying not to get in the way. She realized that Lucas was probably having a harder time than she was. But even so, he was breathing evenly and showing weakness. She thought he was called the Genius Knight for a reason. But they were so close that the protagonist could even hear his heartbeat. At that moment, Lucas hugged the main character. And then he let go and said it was over. He said the girl could relax. He said if she got sick again, she should let him know. Lucas offered to find a place to rest. At that moment, he was attacked from behind. But Lucas easily repelled the blow and wondered if the bandit had thought to take him by surprise with such an obvious attack. The main character suggested that the guy come back already. Lucas said he understood and then they'd hurry up. But as they were returning, the main character fell to her knees. Lucas stooped down to her and asked if she was hurt. He didn't understand how it was possible because he was protecting her. Aiden was doing something in the garden. He looked up at the sky and thought it would soon be dark. At that moment, he realized that the main character had arrived. Aiden handed the flowers to Jane and asked her to take them to the protagonist's room. He then ran to the carriage and began to put on his uniform. But at that moment, he noticed the head butler. The head butler approached Corey and thanked the unknown man for deciding to come. He said they had been waiting for him. Aiden realized it wasn't the main character's carriage, but he didn't realize what it was then. But at that moment, an unknown man and his assistant got out of the carriage. Aiden realized the silver brooch and the indigo-colored clothes. At this moment, another butler asked him if this was the first time he had seen a magician. He said that it looked like this mage was from the Imperial Magic Department. Then the head butler told the man that the Duke was expecting him. At that moment, the man noticed Aiden and saw glow sticks near him. And after that, he smiled at him. The butler had told Aiden that people came here every year to introduce new magical technology. But this was the first time the mage himself had come, because usually representatives came. Aiden was amazed that this man was an Imperial mage. An unknown male was walking and told her it was her interest in us. The deputy was surprised and asked what he had just said, but the man said nothing. He said the guy should have noticed by now that he had potential. The main character was sitting on a bench with Lucas on her lap in front of her. He interjected, meaning she had broken that cane a long time ago, but only now her leg was hurting. Selena said it was right. She said it looks like she shattered her knee. Lucas was a little disappointed and asked how she had it broken, but the main character asked if knees could break in some special way. At this point, Lucas first reaches out to the protagonist's knee and she pretended to be in pain. Lucas said he hadn't even touched her yet, but Selena told him to imagine how much it would hurt her if he touched her. Lucas realized he needed to check the extent of the damage first, but at this moment the main heroine herself pulled up her dress, then very surprised the guy. Lucas got embarrassed and asked what he was doing, but Selena said to ignore it. She said she just wanted to see what condition her knee was in. Lucas interjected not to pay attention. He said the girl was an aristocrat, too. Lucas looked at the protagonist's knee and said it looked terrible. He said it should have been hurting for a long time. But he said that since she was hurt, he should have told her right away. Selena agreed. She realized that Lucas was definitely angry right now. At this point, a priest approached the protagonist and apologized. Lucas walked up to him and asked what was wrong. The priest said he heard they were bruised and thought he could help them. Selena noticed that the boy was pale and gloomy. She wondered if there were vampires in the world. At this point, the guy introduced himself and said he was a priest. He said his name was Ian. The guy showed his wrist, and Lucas said he did have a priest sign. Selena asked the guy if he could help them. Ian lowered his head and said with a gentle smile, of course. After that, he began to recite the spell and healing magic. Immediately thereafter, Selena's knee was healthy. After that, the protagonist was traveling home with Lucas in the evening. Then, when Ian helped the girl, he said that he had actually seen her save a child from a rampaging nobleman. He said that her determination to help the weak when she herself might get hurt. Her kindness reminded him of his immaturity and the need for further training. Lucas understood that's what the guy said, but he didn't understand why the main character had changed so much. She was the girl everyone called a monster without a different name, and now she's apologizing for her mistake. Thinks about people's feelings. Helps the weak. Lucas didn't understand how a person could change so much. He thought it was like she was possessed by another soul. And the most disturbing change of all, always that blank stare. At this point, Lucas noticed that the main character was looking up at the tower and thought she wanted to die. At that moment, Lucas thought that every time he saw a sunset, a memory pops into my head. Well, this is the moment he decided he wasn't going to let the main character die. Magician's emblem silver brooch, indigo-colored uniform, mages of the Empire honored by the people. They're called lords. Aiden thought they were real aristocrats, though he thought the mage that stood behind him looked like a normal human. That's when he wondered if they'd tell the horseshoe man what he was like. He thought I would probably be treated differently. Aiden thought he was different from them. At that moment, Aiden looked out the window and thought that mana power depended on the moon. He didn't understand why he got this ability. Lucas was sitting in his room drinking wine. He realized that even after decades, he couldn't forget that sunset. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago in the past, ran and told his parents to go to him. But that's when his dad told him to slow down. He said that the boy himself knew that Mom couldn't run. But at that moment, Lucas ran up to his parents. Afterwards, he hugged his mom. Lucas's mom told her husband not to scold Lucas because she was feeling good today. Lucas told his dad that he could see that his mom said she was fine with it. But Dad told Lucas not to be so selfish after all. Lucas was from a family of fallen aristocrats. His father hid his status and went to work at dawn every day. Lucas endured no matter but how cold he was or how hungry he was. He wished his mom hadn't died of illness and left him alone. Mom asked the boy if he was cold. She told him to lie down next to her. Afterwards, Lucas hugged his mom and she told him not to worry because she would be fine soon. Lucas thought he was a model child, only when he cried and prayed to God. But he quickly learnt what the world was really like. How disgusting people can be. Lucas finds out that his family is in this situation because his aunt stole their property. Lucas thought that if they had that money, his mom could be cured. But his anger did not make them any less poor. Lucas's father volunteered as a Bria monster-fighting volunteer under the command of his uncle, the Earl of Hunter. Lucas's mom said it was dangerous, but her husband assured her that everything would be fine and told her not to worry. He said that if he went to the battlefield, the Count would help them with medical expenses. He said not to worry. He said he'd be back in a couple of months. Then he went to Lucas and told him not to worry because he would be back. He told Lucas to look after his mom for a while. Afterwards, his father gave Lucas a big hug and told him he loved him. He didn't keep his promise. After 3 months, no one was helping them with treatment. Lucas knocked on his aunt's door. He said his mom was dying. He said she wouldn't live a day without her medication. Then the door opened, and the aunt said that it was the last money she would give him. She said that if he came and started banging on the door again, she would break his arms. Afterwards, she threw him a baggie of money and told him to enter from here. At that moment, Lucas looked at the sunset and realized that the sun was setting. He realized that he had to rush to the hospital. Afterwards, Lucas begged the doctor to give him the cure because his mum might die. But the man said he had too little money. After that, he simply slammed the door in the boy's face. Lucas realized that no one wanted to help his mum. He thought he had to do something. After that, he ran home. When Lucas got home, he saw his mum exhausted. After a while, she opened her eyes and greeted her son. But at that moment, she started coughing up blood. Well, let's go. The woman didn't move anymore. Lucas told Mum to wake up. He told her not to make jokes like that. He told her not to leave him because he couldn't do it alone. He said he was scared. A short time later, Lucas buried his mum. People whispered that he didn't even have money for a coffin and just wrapped her in a rag and buried her. There were rumors that Lucas was from a family of aristocratic graves. Lucas spent days and nights sitting by the bed where his mum died. After a while, his father came home. When Lucas saw his dad, he cried and said his mum was dead. The father hugged his son. At that moment, Lucas noticed that his father's left arm was missing. He asked where it was. It was then that Lucas decided that no matter what, he would survive in this fucking world. He realized that to do that, he needed strength. The Duke of Hawait became his rock of honor. He said Father Lucas sacrificed his goat to save him during the battle. He said he would do his best and keep an eye on him. But Lucas doesn't trust people. He starts hiding with Putty to protect himself from the cruel world. But this was the only family he could swear allegiance to from the bottom of his heart. At this point, Aaron walked into the guy's room and said his light was on, so he thought he was still awake. Lucas pointed to the guy in the chair and told him to sit down, and he became his only trusted friend. And he told Lucas that it's important to have a friend who'll have a drink with you any time. But Lucas told the guy that he just likes to drink. At this point, Aaron said he couldn't stop thinking about Selena. He said she'd be carefree, talking, eating with them, but for some reason he has a feeling she might just disappear. At this point, asked Lucas if the girl seemed stable to him, but Lucas shook his head negatively, and he said he just wants her to stand there with her head held high, but he has no idea what he's supposed to do. Lucas told the guy that he actually had something to say. He asked if he knew a priest called Yan. Lucas stood on the balcony and looked out over the garden. Before that, he told Aaron that there was a priest with magical powers that could help the protagonist. Aram said that with just that power, they could finally heal the hole in Selena's heart. He suggested they all go to him together. But Lucas didn't understand why people didn't know about the existence of such a priest. He didn't think the temple would hide him, because his existence would only benefit them. This was the moment Lucas noticed Aiden A. Thought it looked like insomnia had attacked the people of his mansion today. After Aiden saw Lucas, he bowed to him, and then he was going to leave, but Lucas told him to stop. After that, Lucas jumped off the balcony and approached the guy. He said he was going away with Duke Aaron for a few days. He told the guy to make sure nothing happened to the main character in the meantime. But Aiden said the boy had nothing to worry about. He said the servant was about the girl and always thought only of her safety. He didn't understand what Lucas was saying. He thought maybe it was another warning. But Lucas said he's been recognizing Aiden's unexpected side more often lately. Aiden realized that he had lost his temper, but for some reason, he didn't want to bow his head now. At that moment, he remembered Selena's words that only she was his mistress, and therefore he could not kneel before anyone else. Aiden thought Lucas had started first and said it was getting pretty late and he had to go. But at that moment, Lucas stopped him. He said he meant it. He said if the main character tries to leave while he's away, he has to stop her. He said he'd rather not let her go anywhere under any circumstances. He told Aiden not to let her go to the clock tower under any circumstances. Afterwards, Aiden asked Lucas to let him go, but Lucas told him to answer first. Aiden turned his hand away and said he understood him. The next day, Aaron told his sister that they would be back in a few days. He said that his sister was monitoring her condition. Selena agreed and said she understood him. She thought it was the last time, loved his sister to the very end. At that moment, the protagonist took her brother's hand. She thought that Selena, who usually got annoyed at the sight of him, just a fake Selena who would betray him. The protagonist mentally asked not to be angry with her. She wished her brother a good journey. The protagonist hoped that from now on he would live as a supporting character, but as a real protagonist. After that, Lucas said they were off. The main character took Lucas's hands in hers as well. She asked him to look after her brother. She thought that this was also their last meeting with Lucas. The protagonist realized that a lot had happened in that time, and thought for sure you had become a lot of trouble for him. But at that moment, Aaron slapped their hands together. He asked Lucas why he was taking so long and told him they had to go. Lucas asked if she wasn't going to see him off. He said that although everyone probably thought he was her fiancé-to-be. After that, the brother said goodbye to the Selena. Lucas then looked at Aiden A. and repeated the clock tower. He told him that he hoped he understood him. Aiden agreed and wished the boy a good trip. He didn't understand why he kept talking about that clock tower. In the carriage, Lucas asked Aaron what the matter was. Aaron asked, wondering if he was still asking. He asked if Lucas had completely lost his fear. He asked if he'd realized how he'd been holding her hand. Aaron said that she is his sister after all, and even he can't hold her hand. But Lucas said that even though she's his sister, he has to realize that one day someone will be constantly taking her hand. Lucas asked the guy had he thought about it at all. He said that maybe that person would be him. Aaron told Lucas to stop making jokes, but Lucas said that whoever her future partner was, there was a steep hurdle waiting for him. Aaron realized that, of course, before Selena lost her memory, she had really liked Lucas. But then he wasn't interested in her at all. Aaron wondered if the way she had changed had somehow affected him and made him change his mind. But Aaron thought that Lucas was a dear friend, and he'd give his life for him, but he won't give up the Celine, because he realizes the anger and loneliness tearing him up inside. Aaron thought Selena needed a calmer man who could make her smile, just like Lucas needs a girl who can heal his wounds. At this point, Lucas looked at the clock tower and said it was bothering him. He asked if he could tear it down. The main character would sit in her room and reread the letters and then tear them up. She wondered if they were still around. But at that moment, Aiden asked her to stop. After that, he started opening envelopes on his own. The protagonist read another letter that said she had received an invitation to an evening in the Rose Garden. She asked what it was. Aiden explained that it's a tea party that's off in PBU in the summer. Selena said it sounds interesting. Aiden asked the protagonist what she had just said. Selena repeated that the two of them were leaving together.